everyone. Thank you for joining us for another book club reading video. I make these for those members of our book club that enjoy listening to the books instead of always reading them. So today we are continuing with our two current books, The Alchemist by Coelho and The E-Myth Revisited by Gerber. So we are going to begin by continuing in The Alchemist. We are continuing on page 45 in my little pocket edition. So let's get started. How strange Africa is, thought the boy. He was sitting in a bar, very much like the other bars he had seen along the narrow streets of Tangier. Some men were smoking from a gigantic pipe that they passed from one to the other. In just a few hours, he had seen men walking hand in hand, women with their faces covered, and priests that climbed to the tops of towers and chanted as everyone around him went to their knees and placed their foreheads on the ground. A practice of infidels, he said to himself. As a child in church, he had always looked at the image of Saint Santiago Matamoros on his white horse, his sword unsheathed, and figures such as these kneeling at his feet. The boy felt ill and terribly alone. The infidels had an evil look about them. Besides this, in the rush of his travels, he had forgotten a detail, just one detail, which could keep him from his treasure for a long time. Only Arabic was spoken in this country. The owner of the bar approached him, and the boy pointed to a drink that had been served at the next table. It turned out to be a bitter tea. The boy preferred wine, but he didn't need to worry about that right now. What he had to be concerned about was his treasure and how he was going to go about getting it. The sale of his sheep had left him with enough money in his pouch, and the boy knew that in money there was magic. Whoever has money is never really alone. Before long, maybe in just a few days, he would be at the pyramids. An old man with a breastplate of gold wouldn't have lied just to acquire 6 sheep. The old man had spoken about signs and omens, and as the boy was crossing the street, he had thought about omens. Yes, the old man had known what he was talking about. During the time the boy had spent in the fields of Andalusia, He had become used to learning which path he should take by observing the ground and the sky. He had discovered that the presence of a certain bird meant that a snake was nearby, and that a certain shrub was a sign that there was water in the area. The sheep had taught him that. If God leads the sheep so well, he will also lead a man, he thought, and that made him feel better. The tea seemed less bitter. "Who are you?" he heard a voice ask him in Spanish. The boy was relieved. He was thinking about omens, and someone had appeared. "How come you speak Spanish?" he asked. The new arrival was a young man in Western dress, but the color of his skin suggested he was from this city. He was about the same age and height as the boy. "Almost everyone here speaks Spanish. We're only 2 hours from Spain." "Sit down and let me treat you to something," said the boy, "and ask for a glass of wine for me. I hate this tea." "There is no wine in this country," the young man said. "The religion here forbids it." The boy told him then that he needed to get to the pyramids. He almost began to tell about his treasure, but decided not to do so. If he did, it was possible that the Arab would want a part of it as payment for taking him there. He remembered what the old man had said about offering something you didn't even have yet. "I'd like you to take me there if you can. I can pay you to serve as my guide." "Do you have any idea how to get there?" the newcomer asked. The boy noticed that the owner of the bar stood nearby, listening attentively to their conversation. He felt uneasy at the man's presence, but he had found a guide and didn't want to miss out on an opportunity. "You have to cross the entire Sahara Desert," said the young man, "and to do that, you need money. I need to know whether you have enough." The boy thought it a strange question, but he trusted in the old man who had said that when you really want something, the universe always conspires in your favor. He took his money from his pouch and showed it to the young man. The owner of the bar came over and looked as well. The two men exchanged some words in Arabic, and the bar owner seemed irritated. "Let's get out of here," said the new arrival. "He wants us to leave." The boy was relieved. He got up to pay the bill, but the owner grabbed him and began to speak to him in an angry stream of words. The boy was strong and wanted to retaliate, but he was in a foreign country. His new friend pushed the owner aside and pulled the boy outside with him. "He wanted your money," he said. "Tangier is not like the rest of Africa. This is a port, and every port has its thieves." The boy trusted his new friend. He had helped him out in a dangerous situation. He took out his money and counted it. We could get to the pyramids by tomorrow, said the other, taking the money, but I have to buy 2 camels. They walked together through the narrow streets of Tangier. Everywhere there were stalls with items for sale. They reached the center of a large plaza where the market was held. There were thousands of people there, arguing, selling, and buying. Vegetables for sale amongst daggers, and carpets displayed alongside tobacco. But the boy never took his eye off his new friend. After all, he had all his money. He thought about asking him to give it back, but decided that would be unfriendly. He knew nothing about the customs of the strange land he was in. I'll just watch him, he said to himself. He knew he was stronger than his friend. Suddenly, there in the midst of all that confusion, he saw the most beautiful sword he had ever seen. The scabbard was embossed in silver, and the handle was black and encrusted with precious stones. The boy promised himself that, when he returned to Egypt, he would buy that sword. Ask the owner of that stall how much the sword costs, he said to his friend. Then he realized that he had been distracted for a few moments looking at the sword. His heart squeezed as if his chest had suddenly compressed it. He was afraid to look around because he knew what he would find. He continued to look at the beautiful sword for a bit longer until he summoned the courage to turn around. All around him was the market, with people coming and going, shouting and buying, and the aroma of strange foods. But nowhere could he find his new companion. The boy wanted to believe that his friend had simply become separated from him by accident. He decided to stay right there and await his return. As he waited, a priest climbed to the top of a nearby tower and began his chant. Everyone in the market fell to their knees, touched their foreheads to the ground, and took up the chant. Then, like a colony of worker ants, they dismantled their stalls and left. So, an unfortunate setback for our shepherd boy. And return to our next reading episode to find out more. Or you can continue reading on your own. Now we continue with an excerpt of the E-Myth. In the E-Myth, we will continue reading at the beginning of chapter 5, Beyond the Comfort Zone. As usual, it begins with a quote. Drastic change creates an estrangement from the self and generates a need for a new birth of a new identity. And it perhaps depends on the way this need is satisfied, whether the process of change runs smoothly or is attended with convulsions and explosions. A quote by Eric Hoffer from The Temper of Our Time. Okay. Every adolescent business reaches a point where it pushes beyond its owner's comfort zone, the boundary within which he feels secure in his ability to control his environment, and outside of which he begins to lose that control. The technician's boundary is determined by how much he can do himself. The manager's is defined by how many technicians he can supervise effectively, or how many subordinate managers he can organize into a productive effort. The entrepreneur's boundary is a function of how many managers he can engage in pursuit of his own vision. As a business grows, it invariably exceeds its owner's ability to control it, to touch, feel, and see the work that needs to be done, and to inspect its progress personally, as every technician needs to do. Out of desperation, he does what he knows how to do rather than what he doesn't, thereby abdicating his role as manager and passing his accountability down to someone else, a Harry. At that point, his desperation turns into hope. He hopes that Harry will handle it so that he won't have to worry about it anymore. But Harry has needs of his own. Harry's also a technician. He needs more direction than the technician can give him. He needs to know why he's doing what he's doing. He needs to know the result he's accountable for and the standards against which his work is being evaluated. He also needs to know where the business is going and where his accountabilities fit into its overall strategy. To produce effectively, Harry needs something the technician turned business owner isn't capable of giving him: a manager. And the lack of one causes the business to go into a tailspin. And as the business grows beyond the owner's comfort zone, as the tailspin accelerates, there are only 3 courses of action to be taken. Only 3 ways the business can turn. It can return to infancy, it can go for broke, or it can hang on for dear life. Let's take a look at each. Getting small again. One of the most consistent and predictable reactions of the technician turned business owner to adolescent chaos is the decision to get small again. If you can't control the chaos, get rid of it. Go back to the way it used to be when you did everything yourself, when you didn't have people to worry about, or too many customers, or too many unpayable payables and unreceivable receivables, or too much inventory. In short, go back to the time when business was simple, back to infancy. And thousands upon thousands of technicians do just that. They get rid of their people, get rid of their inventory, wrap up their payables in a large bag, rent a smaller facility, put the machine in the middle, put the telephone by the machine, and go back to doing it all by themselves again. They go back to being the owner, sole proprietor, chief cook, and bottle washer, doing everything that needs to be done, all alone, but comfortable with the feeling of regained control. What can go wrong? They think to themselves, forgetting at once that they've been there before, predictably, this too takes its toll. One morning, it could be 6 weeks or 6 years following the day you got small again, the inevitable happens. You wake up in bed and your spouse turns to you and says, "What's wrong? You're not looking too good." "Do you want to talk about it?" he or she asks. "It's simple," you say. "I don't want to go in there anymore." Then your spouse asks you the obvious question, "But if you don't, who will?" And all of a sudden you are struck with the reality of your condition. You realize something you've avoided all these years. You come face to face with the unavoidable truth. You don't own a business, you own a job. What's more, it's the worst job in the world. You can't close it when you want to, because if it's closed, you don't get paid. You can't leave it when you want to, because when you leave, there's no one to do the work. You can't sell it when you want to, because who wants to buy a job? At that point, you feel the despair and the cynicism almost every small business owner gets to feel. If there was ever a dream, however small, it's gone. And with it, any desire to keep busy, busy, busy. You don't wash the windows anymore. You don't sweep the floors. The customers become a problem rather than an opportunity. Because if someone buys something, you're going to have to do the work. Your standards of dress begin to deteriorate. The sign on the front door fades and peels, and you don't care. For when the dream is gone, the only thing left is the work, the tyranny of routine, the day-to-day grind of purposeless activity. Finally, you close the doors. There's nothing to keep you there anymore. According to the Small Business Administration, more than 600,000 such businesses close their doors in the United States every year. And it's understandable. Your business, once the shining promise of your life, and now no promise at all, has gradually become a mortuary for your dead dreams. Going for broke. The adolescent business has another alternative that is certainly less painful and decidedly more dramatic than getting small. It can just keep growing faster and faster until it self-destructs of its own momentum. The roll call is endless. ITEL, Osborne Computer, Colico, and countless more. All such going for broke companies were started with an entrepreneurial seizure by a technician who focused on the wrong end of the business, the commodity the business made, rather than the business itself. Going for broke businesses are a sign of our time. They are a high-tech phenomenon. With the explosion of new technology and the numbers of those who create it, a whole new breed of technicians has flocked to the business arena. Along with these wizards and their seemingly unlimited technical virtuosity, an avalanche of new products has thundered through the wide open doors of an enthralled and receptive marketplace. Unfortunately, Most of these companies barely get through the doors before the uncontrollable momentum that got them there forces them to stumble and then fall. All the excesses of adolescence, frustrating and bewildering as they might be in a normally expanding company, are disastrous in a going-for-broke business. As quickly as it grows, the chaos grows even faster. For tied to the tail of a technological breakthrough, the technician and his people rarely break free long enough to gain some perspective about their condition. The demand for the commodity of which they are so proud quickly exceeds their chronically adolescent ability to produce it. The result is almost always catastrophic. The business explodes, leaving behind it people who most often justify the explosion as an inevitable consequence of doing business on a fast track, where luck and speed and a brilliant bit of technological daring are the necessary components for making it big. The reality is otherwise. Luck and speed and brilliant technology have never been enough, because somebody is always luckier, faster, and technologically brighter. Unfortunately, once on a fast track, there's precious little time to listen. The race is won by reflex, a stroke of genius or a stroke of luck. Going for broke is the high-tech equivalent of Russian roulette, oftentimes played by people who don't even know the gun is loaded. Adolescent survival. The most tragic possibility of all for an adolescent business is that it actually survives. You're an incredibly strong-willed, stubborn, single-minded individual who's determined not to be beaten. You go into your business every morning with a vengeance, absolutely convinced that it's a jungle out there, and fully committed to doing whatever is necessary to survive. And you do survive. Kicking and scratching, beating up your people and your customers, ranting and raving at your family and friends, because, after all, you've got to keep the business going. And you know there's only one way to do it. You've got to be there all the time. In adolescent survival, you're consumed by the business and the possibility of losing it. And so you put everything you have into it. And for whatever reason, you manage to keep it going. Day after day, fighting the same battles in exactly the same way you did the day before. You never change. Night after night, you go home to unwind, only to wind up even tighter in anticipation of tomorrow. Finally, your business doesn't explode. You do. You're like a 12-cylinder engine working on one cylinder, pumping away, trying with everything you've got to produce 12 cylinders worth of results. But finally, and inevitably, there is nothing left. There is simply nothing more you can do except face the fact that one cylinder can't produce the results of 12, no matter how hard it tries. Something has to give, and that something is you. Does this sound familiar? Well, If you've been in business for a while, it should. And if you haven't been in business for long, it probably will sound familiar one day. Because the tragedy is that the condition of infancy and adolescence dominates American small business. It is a condition in most of the small businesses we have visited over the past 25 years. A condition of rampant confusion and wasted spirits. It didn't need to happen. There is a better way. Okay, so that is all we have for today's book club reading. I hope you enjoyed this installment. As usual, you can choose to continue reading on your own or to come back to our next book club reading episode. Okay? Thank you for listening, and I will see you during our next meeting.